Picture a solid black background. A full, vibrant, glossy black. It should take up your entire visual field. If you're someone who has or had what would be considered typical sight, 2 eyes with full peripheral vision, then fill up that range with this shiny black surface. If your surface is or was less than that, go ahead and fill that range. My personal range of vision has always been from about in front of my nose and to the right. My left eye and optic nerve removed at 1 year old. I have no recollection of sight from that side. It's not black. It's as if you asked, what can you see out of your ear? That's nothing. Nothing and black are not the same. I'm specifically talking about color, as in that portion of the visible spectrum of light that's reflected back from a surface. The darker the color, the more light it absorbs. So black consists of all that light. It absorbs it where white reflects it. This glossy black surface is the first layer of my hallucinations, or what's medically known as Charles-Bonnet syndrome. In this episode, I want to explore my hallucinations or visions. As I began thinking about this topic, I noticed the correlation between talking about what I see and blind people authoring or in any way participating in the production of audio description. When it comes to AD, the conversation is about what others see and describe to us. Today, we're talking about what we see and present to the world. Now, so far you heard my voice, but I brought some friends along. This is not a figment of your imagination, a hallucination, dream, or nightmare. This is Read My Mind Radio, and I'm your host, Thomas Reed. We're back, baby. Flipping the script on audio description. Read my mind. Read my mind.
Radio. I think in some ways the description is the artwork.
So what is Charles-Bonnet syndrome? CBS is a condition that some people get when they lose some or all their vision. It causes them to have visual hallucinations, seeing things that aren't really there. This condition is surprisingly common among people with certain types of vision loss, such as age-related macular degeneration. No, never had that. Glaucoma. No me, papi. Diabetic retinopathy. No man. Without visual data coming in through the eyes. That's me. The brain fills the void and makes up images or recalls stored images for you to see. This is what causes the visual hallucinations of CBS. It's very similar to how people who have lost a limb may feel phantom pain, and it is not a sign of a mental health problem. Here's the thing. My hallucinations aren't specific at all. I've read and heard from some people who experience CBS, and it sounds nothing like what I see. So from this point forward, let's toss out the medical jargon and focus on what we see. Damn, medical jargon is heavy. Okay, back to that glossy black surface I mentioned earlier. Go ahead and fill your entire visual field with that image. Here's where it gets a bit tricky. What I see is abstract, random shapes and colors that form on top of that black surface. They change, or more like morph, throughout the day, remaining static for only seconds at a time. Right now, I see an upside-down letter V spread wide with curved edges. It's a royal blue. It sort of leads up to a dark orange, with a hint of red oval shape that is split in the middle where the color is slowly blending into a cloudy white. And now, some of the colors remain, but the shapes are totally different.
They're sparkly, twinkly, like water. They're vibrant. They're colors like blue and purple and green with highlights of orange and yellow and red. I'm at a loss for words sometimes. There's a lot of similes and metaphors, but there's not enough words to describe what I'm seeing. And I do call them apparitions and like playful spirits.
Carmen Papalia, from Vancouver, Canada.
I'm a non-visual social practice artist with chronic and episodic pain. I'm white with an olive complexion. I have black hair. I have a beard. There's also these visual events that happen too on a different layer. Some of them are like what I call a backward sea, patrolling manta ray. It kind of just like swims across my visual field back and forth and back and forth. I see this one hallucination maybe like 3 times a day. It's a spiral. It spins maybe for like, I don't know, 5 seconds, and then it kind of like just flies away. I'm always seeing them, and they have gotten more amplified over time. When I was young, they weren't as vibrant or prominent in my visual field. It's just very engaging and animated.
His hallucinations move!
Mine are more like a video, PowerPoint, or slide deck presentation dissolve transition. It happens, but the speed is most often too fast to see, unless perhaps you're really focusing in. It doesn't translate to movement. More on these apparitions, hallucinations, visions?
Scintillating photopsia. It's an interesting phenomena. It started to occur as my sight loss was decreasing. I see visual phenomena day and night, and whether my eyes are open or closed. Somewhat like hallucinations, I guess, but I really wouldn't call it a hallucination in that strict sense of the meaning, because I see a continual flickering and flashing of light across my whole visual field. It reminds me a little bit of when the sun is low on the horizon and it's setting over a big lake or the ocean or a body of water with all kind of little waves. This sea of little flashes and flickers of light. Not quite as bright as it is with the sunlight.
If that's not enough, there's another layer.
On top of that, I have some moving images and shapes that occur and that vary a little bit from time to time. One of them is a little bit like a slowly rotating propeller blade, propeller from a ship, or the old sweep of a radar that goes around in a circle and leaves a little trail wave of light that ripples out behind it. And these things rotate about 1 rotation per second. I'll see it rotate 5, 6, 7 times. It almost comes flying off its axis, like as if the propeller has just become dislodged, and then it disappears off in the distance.
That's Colin Van Ushelen.
I am a community psychologist and pyrotechnician in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I am white with gray-green eyes, light brown hair, he, him, his.
Yeah, you heard that correctly. Pyrotechnician. More on that later, but first, more about that second layer of shapes or visual phenomena.
I describe it a little bit like a gummy worm. It's a band of light that's somewhat curved, usually kind of a bright whitish purple. It's very, very bright. I'll have these band, it's almost like in a couple of arches that move across my visual field, sometimes left to right, sometimes bottom to top or top to bottom. It just kind of sweeps across my visual field.
Do you think that's similar to the floaters?
Yes, very much, because as I try to focus on one of these things, then it keeps moving outside of my visual field. One of the most interesting things that I see often occurs early in the morning if I wake up from a dream. It's almost as if I'm looking at how it looks if you look at a dry bottom of a lake bed or a stream bed where the water has receded and the sun has dried everything out, and then you have these little cracks that separate these little clumps of land. They're like little islands. These kind of little islands, but they're all illuminated a bright greenish color. Around them it's just black. They're almost like flickering sometimes with these kind of purple sparkles in them. And these islands seem to grow in size or divide in size and get smaller, and then sometimes cluster together, and sometimes these big clusters will form in kind of a purpley color. It's beautiful to look at.
My shapes, which I could refer to as little islands, also come together where you can still see their outline. I agree with Colin. They are beautiful. But I didn't necessarily think that in the beginning. I can't recall the first time I noticed these colorful apparitions. Besides having floaters as a child, I think my first experience with visual phenomena occurred just prior to official blindness. Before my surgery to remove my right eye, I had a biopsy done about a month earlier. My eye was patched up, which left me functionally blind, since I had no left eye. One day I thought I was seeing the sun sort of sneak into the room through the window blinds. Then I realized I wasn't even in front of a window. It remained in my visual field no matter what room I was in or the time of day. It wasn't until a few months after the removal of my right eye that I began noticing the current style of shapes and colors.
It was a bit more of an annoyance. It was almost like a see-through screen that was between me and the outer world that I was still able to see at that point. Mountains and trees and faces of people, and then I would have this sort of display in the foreground over the top of it, this constant shimmering, flicking. But now, as my capacity to see what's out and around me has diminished, this has become more of, okay, well, this is what I have available for me to see. It's really not an annoyance. It just feels so familiar. It's always there.
These ever-present, random, constantly changing, colorful figures are like family or a close friend. They're around and ready to just kick it with me, take my mind off of the problems, or at least just hang out with me as I contemplate.
It's difficult to escape from, but it's not unpleasant for me. It's just part of the background of my day-to-day life. In terms of meaning, sometimes it just makes me smile.
These visions can be a way to kill some time entertaining ourselves, similar to television or movies. So therefore, in this conversation, my friends and I are describers, crafting words to help you form images in your mind.
I've described it before like an animated oil painting from space. It definitely has like an underwater quality to it, bioluminescent. Oil in water, maybe with some food coloring. It's quite animated and dynamic for me. I don't try to interpret it necessarily like is this an omen for something? But I do really enjoy seeing it move.
There are times when I drift off and think about what the shapes bring to mind. Sort of like the Rorschach psychological test, where subjects are asked to look at ink blots and describe what they see. At least that's how it went down in so many detective shows back in the 70s and 80s.
You're projecting into the image you're looking at, whether your interpretation, and it's supposedly reveals a lot about your inner workings.
Yeah,
so,
that's why I'm not going to say what I see.
Fair enough.
I know many people get uncomfortable with that language. Am I really seeing? After all, I have no eyes. It's probably the same people who try to correct those of us who read audiobooks.
Well, actually, you're listening to a book, not reading it.
As if me consuming the information through my ears is less valid than taking it in through my eyes.
For me, when I started putting value in the non-visual, my world opened up. And that's what I'm continuing to explore in my work and my writing and through the various relationships that I have with other people who want to be part of that world. I do this project since 2010. It's my first exhibited artwork. It's a walking tour where I take groups. My largest group has been 90 participants. They all line up behind me, link arms, and shut their eyes, and I take them on an hour-long walk through a city or on a route that I've mapped and that I'm familiar with. The whole point of the walk is to exercise our non-visual senses, something that we don't really dedicate time or intention to.
This is not a walk in my shoe or blindness simulation type thing. Heck no. This is about exploring by more than just vision.
I can invite them to practice using their non-visual senses. That walking tour is really about the support network that coalesces when like a group of people come together around the same activity and the ways that we care for each other when we need to.
You mentioned you are a pyrotechnic in training, so let's talk a little bit about fireworks.
It just so happened that every summer in Vancouver there was an event where 3 nights in the end of July and beginning of August, they would have a 20 to 25 minute pyrotechnics display where the fireworks were all synchronized to music. They are launched from a couple of barges that are anchored out in the English Bay Harbor here in Vancouver, which is a gorgeous location, and it's rimmed with beaches all along, and you would get 200,000 to 300,000 people come out and sit on the beach in the evening, watch the sunset, and take in the fireworks display. In the center of it, they would even have a big PA system where the music was broadcast out on the beach. They could see how the music was represented in the form of light during these displays, and it was just fantastic. It's not just the music, it's not just the light of fireworks, but it's also the sound of the firework and the echo of that sound, how it kind of bounces around you, and the sort of immersive quality of the whole experience was tremendous.
That's sight and sound. What else?
Sometimes you can smell the smoke. It's a feeling sensation too. These moments when the artistry of what I'm beholding or witnessing touches me in a way that it just gives me goosebumps. I was at English Bay. I was with a close friend. There was a moment when the music was kind of quiet and the fireworks were kind of muffled, sizzling sound, and the crowd grew entirely silent. And I had this feeling something amazing was going on, and nobody was saying a word. I leaned over to my friend Brett, and I whispered, and I said, "Brett, what's happening?" He leaned back into me, and he said, "It's burning tears. It's thousands of burning tears just slowly dripping down from the sky." That's the kind of experience that I have often in the moments of tremendous beauty, in the presence of art, whether it be music or a fireworks effect such as this one, which was these kind of long orange reddish tendrils of light that were just dripping down all through the sky. I call that resonance.
Ultimately, isn't that what it's all about? Feeling? It's the feeling of wanting these experiences that can lead to someone figuring out how to actually make it possible.
I was involved with an organization here in Vancouver called Vocal Eye Descriptive Arts. They describe artistic and cultural events, usually live performance art, to make it more accessible to people from the blind and low vision community. I approached the executive director, Steph Kirkland, and I said, "Hey, Steph, would you be willing to come down and describe the fireworks?" And she was up to the challenge. We, of course, talked about how this was an unusual thing, but she did a bit of study about it. And by this time in my life, I had also assembled a bit of a vocabulary list and a glossary of terms.
I can't help but be reminded how some, when explaining the history of audio description, tend to either breeze through or totally leave out the fact that blind people started this art. I don't know if Colin was the first to describe fireworks, but he initiated this process. He developed a vocabulary used to describe exploding fireworks.
There's one that's called a chrysanthemum, a spherical effect where you see little trails of light behind the stars as they move out from the center point, a little bit like a dandelion that's gone to seed. There are other effects that are more like a shooting star with a long trail of sparkling light, and these are called comets. Some are called willows because they look a little bit like a weeping willow tree or a palm tree. It's like describing a flower bouquet where the flowers are constantly changing size and form and shape and color and arrangement.
It's not easy, but for Colin, it's worth it. Similar to how audio description enables those who enjoy movies and television to stay connected with that part of their life, Colin wanted to continue enjoying fireworks. He discovered alternatives to just the visuals.
There was this one moment that evening that Steph was describing, kind of a little cluster of stars that seemed to be slowly drifting down. I was trying to kind of comprehend how quickly is that moving in the sky. I asked her to trace it out on my skin using her fingers, and so she traced it out on my forearm, the speed of this descent. Just her doing that gave me goosebumps at that moment, because I thought, this is how to do it, because with the tactile gesture, she could convey the movement and the speed and somewhat of the character of the light in ways that words were unable to capture. Over the course of the next year, she explored that in collaboration with me, and that was the genesis of the description technique that subsequently became known as fingerworks for fireworks.
Combining the glossary of terms describing fireworks with the tactile representation and sound.
That's become a foundation for my continued exploration in what I call cross-sensory translation. How can we translate something from the visual modality into non-visual modalities so that we kind of stay connected with it and maybe it brings a new perspective on it, a new way of engaging with it.
If you're thinking this is all about trying to hold on to sight, you're totally mistaken. Holding on to things that bring you joy, community, things that spark thought and ideas. Yes, an exploration of the human experience that challenges the ableist vision-centric way of going through life. I'm going to assume you don't compare to the visual experience.
No, I receive a lot of description of art in my job. As an artist, usually when I'm going to an art gallery, an artist or a curator is describing things for me, which is nice, or a describer that I enjoy their approach. So it's usually pretty good description that I'm getting, but I don't equate it. It creates something, some relationship, flexibility where I can understand these words as the thing itself. We really are just interpreting through our visual sense usually anyways. We're subjective. If you're inspecting something visually, you're interpreting that and then reporting about it. That's the same thing that's happening when someone's describing what they're seeing to me and I'm adopting it as true, as a version of truth. There's been times where people have described artworks to me and sent me a description in email. I feel like I received an artwork. I'm like, oh, wow, like we didn't even have to like steal this from the collection. It's I can send it to someone else now. I think in some ways the description is the artwork.
That's it. The description is the art. Yet, there's still a lot of controversy around blind people participating in this field. Can you talk a little bit about the roles that you fill in the process of creating AD?
My roles originally just started kind of as a collaborator or advisor on projects because I wasn't comfortable with maybe recording my voice. I'd work with other people to write stuff down since my vision is impaired. There's a guy locally named Victor Cole who does a lot of like audio descriptions for local performances and like award ceremonies and all these other cool stuff that the Chicago disabled arts community employ him to do that. And started talking to him about his process and like picking up on that and then realizing that my role as a blind person to create this is probably going to be different than how Victor approaches it, which is cool because that means you have like more voices and more opportunities to give different perspectives of stuff.
That's Andrew Slater, sound designer, composer, and accessibility professional. Oh yeah, he's a member of a cool funk band called Velcro Lewis Group.
My pronouns are he, him. I'm a middle-aged white man with dirty blonde hair, a full red beard with some gray. I'm wearing a red t-shirt with white lettering that says, I am not Daredevil.
Do they stop you and ask you, excuse me?
I just point to the shirt.
Andrew recently had the opportunity to write and record the audio description for a film called The Tuba Thieves by Allison O'Daniel, a deaf director. It debuted at Sundance.
95% of the film, the dialogue is ASL. My wife is autistic and I'm visually impaired. We wrote the AD and I narrated it. I was able to hire these 3 disabled voice actors to read basically the subtitles and the captions. They had done some of this work before. They're all actors and performers and stuff. Everybody is disabled on this thing. We're all showing up as we should.
I haven't seen the film, but I can tell you that alone makes me want to see it.
What was cool about this film is that the sound itself was so incredibly descriptive, very referential, and all sounds that I think so many of us would get. The actual audio description that I read and recorded was real minimal. There's a lot of silence in the film, so I kind of shut up. This is a weird, experimental, almost documentary style film. I have done so much like experimental audio description sort of stuff. Layered voices and sound design and weird poetic sort of approaches to stuff. I could still bring some of that energy, but certainly didn't want to make a huge mess out of it. I'm happy with how it worked out.
You said that you and your wife wrote the AD for the film.
Yeah. We watched the movie, we took notes, put it on the time code and that sort of thing. I don't know if this is a process that other people do. We sat down here and put it on the big monitor based on how Tressa would describe what's on screen. Sometimes I could see it because a lot of the movie is slow. We'd go off some of the notes that the producer gave us. I would just kind of reword it, edit it so it was more interesting to kind of match the energy, especially the energy of these captions. These captions were out of control, awesome, and weird and abstract at times.
Recognizing the vibe of the film, Andrew decided he didn't want to have a straightforward approach to the AD with what he describes as tunnel vision. Andrew, with a bit of assistance from his wife, Tressa, incorporates his own perspective of the film. Sometimes that's more about heart and emotion than it is about simply verbalizing the visuals.
It's a cool film. It has people talking about when Prince and the Revolution played Gallaudet University to like a whole hundreds of deaf folks. There's these photos because there was no film. On the left is the band rocking out, and you can see that Prince has his like white Stratocaster up high, and he's just jamming, and he's wearing purple even though it's black and white. And then to the right, it's like hundreds of deaf people all signing "I love you" with the index, the pinky, and the thumb up. That photo and another one of Prince where he's just giving the "I love you" sign, standing next to this kid, this huge grin on Prince's face, where you're just like, man. I got like all emotional. I was like, how do I describe this? Because this is just beautiful. And it's like a still photo on screen for 5 seconds.
You know what's crazy? I have a Purple Rain shirt on right now.
You know what? That's not crazy. That makes a lot of sense. It's like, of course.
I never actually thought me seeing these hallucinations made me crazy. I just thought I'd be perceived that way. I mean, come on. Consider the way blindness totally affected how I'm perceived in public. Rather than thinking something was wrong with me, I sought out to make connections between my visions and my feelings. I thought I could find some deeper meaning. I thought I could answer the question, what am I supposed to do with these visions?
I don't think it has particular specific meaning. I think it's a somewhat random kind of activation of our nervous system to fill in the space that's left behind with the degeneration of the photoreceptor cells.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder, is it related to something that I'm feeling, something that I'm not consciously thinking about? I guess scientifically that's probably not the case, but I kind of still like to hold on to it. As I started to examine my visions more closely, I saw beauty. For example, the summer season has its own set of colors. Mango yellow orange, strawberry red, what I call Caribbean blue. How could these not have a positive effect on my mood?
Mango daiquiri, anyone?
What I once thought of as a nuisance, I began wondering if it could actually be more like a new sense. The ability to access an abstract projection of something from within me. Maybe I'm communicating with myself. A repurposing of the screen in the theater that is my mind, my own internal broadcast network. Thanks to Charles Bonnet syndrome.
This is CBS.
When I'm working with audio, that could be another time where things become clearer. There's some clarity that happens, and like I could be adjusting EQ, and sometimes I start to say, okay, I'm going to go based on what I see. This feels right now because this is becoming clear. Wow, this was a lot of fun because I'm telling you, I tell my family about it, my immediate family, so my wife and my daughters. I don't think I ventured out and told anyone outside of my home about this yet. I mean, I mentioned that, I got Charles Bonnet, but that's it.
Yeah, you tell family, the people closest to you, because they're the most likely to believe you. I love how it's functional for you in a certain way too, even as a system for telling what time of year it is. I love that. It's like your calendar. It serves a function within your audio production. It tells you when you're tired. I think this is something that's connected to disability art, just disability experience in general, a practice that productively engages with disability. We are always in some way trying to make meaning of these experiences. What dominant culture is telling us is that there's no value in that, or, oh, you have to take this pill, procedure, etc., to get rid of that. The people who want to explore what it means to live non-visually or even with pain, like I actually think my pain experience is generative too. Like it allows me to make long-term trusting relationships with people that are based in care. I open up a lot with folks, and because of it, of course, there's terrible parts to it too, but I think it gives me a lot. I think these hallucinations do as well.
When someone gives you a description of something, you trust what they say, right? I feel like it's hard for people to probably trust what I'm saying. They can't verify it themselves. They have no experience with it. They can't verify it. With audio description, we as blind people trust what we're told. And when blind people are trying to be involved in audio description, I don't feel we're trusted. We're always questioned. Trying to get in as a narrator, most definitely trying to get in as a writer.
I think it has to do with dominant culture's privileging of visual experience. The non-visual doesn't hold much value. I don't know why we think that vision isn't subjective. It's just as subjective as describing the sound of something. For example, we're all going to make our own associations to what we're seeing, what we're hearing and feeling. When I am in a position where I'm not being trusted and I'm sharing my truth, that really triggers me. I mean, this comes from me having medical trauma and being in hospital and needing medicine. Maybe there's an obstructive nurse or physician. Ableism is embedded in our culture.
What role does trust play in your process?
In my situation, working on the Tuba Thieves with my wife, there was no NDA. We actually got complete trust. Say you got to sign an NDA, and people are like, well, I don't want this sighted person to help you work on this. We don't want them to leak these secrets either. It's like, well, have them sign an NDA, right? It's just another case of like, they don't trust us to do something for us. That's whack. They don't trust us to the point where you're going to be underbid somebody that can do like the text-to-speech thing, or somebody who's a voiceover artist or actor or whatever and gets all these commercial gigs and stuff and just kind of like, oh yeah, no, I can totally write audio description. It's just what's on the screen with no training.
It's one thing if an individual questions or doubts another person's abilities based on an experience. Maybe this person didn't do a good job the first time. The work was sloppy and not up to par. It would be quite understandable if someone were hesitant or even refused to hire that person again. Marginalized groups aren't always afforded that same opportunity. The actions of one seem to affect the entire group. But the non-believers aren't looking for proof that someone can do the work. They use everything to support their own claim that a group can't.
The people I know involved, I know them all from being blind. They're not just like, here's a gift. It's like, hey, I made this in community and collaboration with blind people. If I'm sighted, there were blind people involved in this, where a lot of the times they feel like it's, oh, what, you don't like the sound quality? Oh, you don't like how it's written? Well, you should be even lucky that we're doing it. I don't like that attitude. I feel like people don't trust us with anything. People don't trust that I can cross the street. People don't even trust that I can tie my shoes. Wait a minute. Let me ask you, sighted people.
This is a public service announcement.
Do you look at your shoes when you tie them? Do you look at your teeth when you brush them? Because that's just weird.
Last October, I was invited to testify during what felt like a trial where blind people were forced to defend their desires to participate in the production of audio description. This meeting was supposedly held to give the community a, quote, opportunity to provide feedback and opinion to the Certification Subject Matter Expert Committee before they reach a judgment on whether or not blind people should be allowed to write audio description. These are my words. I'm sure it wouldn't be presented this way, but the result, in my opinion, is the same, forcing blind people to seek sighted approval. And let's be real. We're not talking about a blind person with ambitions of driving trucks. Rather, those interested in finding their own accommodation to complete a job.
What was cool with working with Allison O'Daniel is she's a disabled artist and filmmaker. She just trusted that we would do what was best and that we would do it and it would be cool and creative and not some sort of boring ass thing. We all realize that we don't want to send out some jalopy sort of audio description out for our community because it's just a sellout move.
We're all subject to having the quality of our work open for critique. But what gives anyone the right to say what someone can or cannot aspire to do? I'm all too familiar with the internal struggle that goes on when an idea first presents itself. That initial excitement followed by the questions. All of the time, put into thinking about how to make it possible, but also dealing with self-doubt. Then, finding the solution that eliminates the doubt.
I think what it reveals to me most clearly is the value in having some agency about developing an approach to do stuff that I want to do that might not be already existing out there in the world. As far as I know, no one was into describing fireworks for the benefit of people who are blind at that moment. Rather than me wishing and hoping that someone would invent this kind of thing, to say, hey, this is what I'm imagining, this is what I would like to do. It's through those kind of moments that are really quite generative in terms of where they could lead, and that it would have interest for other people too. In terms of my own adjustment to blindness, this is one of the ways that works for me. This is one of the things where I still have that desire that I'm going to work at this, and I'm going to do whatever I can to stay connected with this art form.
That's a belief in self, but that doubt can remain, even when doing the work. It's ever present, just waiting for a chance to take over. Meanwhile, a group focused on rehabilitation are empowered to decide who can or cannot pursue the art of writing audio description. I'm hanging on to that word agency because what in the world, Colin, makes you think you can move from being a consumer of fireworks, just enjoying them, into actually creating them? What nerve?
Well, it's a really nice question. And what I'm doing is really quite unreasonable. I am a pyrotechnician. I am learning about not just like how fireworks look and how they function, but actually how they're constructed, what the components are, how they are assembled, the technical detail of the art form. I'm not doing it because I'm blind or like I'm going to do something crazy. I'm doing it because it's a natural reflection of my curiosity and interest in this particular field.
And don't underestimate the power of individual encouragement.
Carmen Papalia, he said, Colin, you should really do something with your interest in fireworks. What you're doing here is amazing. It really sort of changes the discourse about accessibility as kind of a, quote, service or a one-size-fits-all type of thing into a more relational realm where this is kind of negotiated between someone who is not using their eyes to perceive the world and someone who is able to be a guide or interpret the visual world with us, where we have some agency about how that works. I'm not trying to do what's impossible, but I'm trying to do what's within my realm of possibility where I do have some agency on designing something. My current ambition is to design a pyromusical display from my standpoint as someone who has sight loss. It's ridiculous, but I'm loving it.
I guess I should just be happy I didn't have to become certified to have a podcast. Certified to raise my children? Some people are certified.
Woo! Come and get it!
This might sound like a weird question, but who gave you or who can give you permission to do this?
You know, first of all, no one gave me permission per se. in terms of the kind of permission to pursue this as an area of interest, it was a conversation I had with a pyrotechnician here in British Columbia, Bill Reynolds. I was looking for somebody who had a bit of a proper vocabulary list of fireworks effects that went along with images of what those look like that I could use for training purposes. I managed to be referred to Bill, and I spoke with him, and we had this conversation. At the end of the conversation, I'm like, oh, by the way, I just thought I should mention, that I have this like crazy ambition that one day I want to design a fireworks display of my own, and do a pyro musical to my favorite song. And I thought like, oh God, he's going to hang up on me or laugh or whatever. He said, well, do you want to fail at that? Well, no, I don't. No, I actually kind of think it'd be really cool to do. He said, well, Colin, then you have to do it. Because if you don't do it, you will most certainly fail. And I suggest you do it now. My heart started to pound, and I just knew he's right. He's right. If I'm going to do anything with this crazy dream, didn't really believe in myself that I could do this. Yeah. And I think it was him that kind of kickstarted me into seeing, okay, well, what would it take to make this happen?
So what's your choice? Be the one encouraging the pursuit of passions, or the obstructionist, placing obstacles in front of a well-meaning person just trying to do their thing. Chances are, you believe what I'm sharing with you about my visions, my hallucinations, right? Yet, there's absolutely no way for you to verify what I see. I mean, you can learn more about CBS and verify that it exists and others sharing the experience, but you'll never see what I see.
Look, if I tell you that this is what's going on, this is what's going on. I wrote down a description for a painting that doesn't exist. It was just something that was in my head. That kind of work is meant for a sighted audience, talking in their terms. Using color is basically like an access move so that sighted people could engage. They can see like, yeah, you can kind of have fun and do weird stuff when you're describing things. Totally like visually centered for that. But then when I do descriptions of some of my sound work, it's never visual. I'm describing the space that I did this recording, what I did, texture, smell, touch, vibration, emotional sort of stuff with a lot of metaphor. I still think visually sometimes and describe things with sight in mind and image in mind, but that's mostly just for communication.
When I, as a person who's totally blind, decides to watch visual content, I'm trusting in that group of people producing the audio description. I can never verify it for myself. I can ask another person that I trust, but that's all I could do. Have trust and faith. How hard is it to trust that a blind person can provide thoughtful feedback in the form of quality control, can craft a concise and effective script using an accommodation that works for them? It goes beyond audio description. Can safely teach orientation and mobility skills. Can use technology efficiently to perform all sorts of jobs. Can raise a child? It's like anyone else. We're just on a quest to live our lives.
Can I kick it? Sheesh.
At any given moment, I can engage with my visions, stopping whatever I'm doing to observe the colors and shapes. Once, while using Ambien, I laid in bed waiting to feel sleepy, observing the difference in colors. All of a sudden, I noticed movement. The shapes became much smaller and darker. An electrified forest green on black with shimmering, blinking red dots. Then, suddenly they all began floating, moving with intention as if about to reveal something I've been waiting to learn. Lying there, patiently waiting to see what was next. Next thing you know, I'm waking up. It's 3:32 a.m. and I can't fall back asleep. The bright colors quickly return. I never find out what I thought the Ambien was about to reveal. What was behind that movement? I want to know. But the Ambien is for putting me to sleep, not enhancing my visions.
This is something I'm trying to explore with my brother right now, who grows cannabis for me. I also have a pretty severe pain condition. It's degenerative as well. I grew up spending a lot of time in hospital, but what has worked for me, especially as a replacement for narcotics, has been cannabis, as well as some other medications, especially what my brother is able to grow for me as my caregiver grower. This is like a volunteer role through Health Canada, where we register for a growing license. He produces a certain amount for me. We make concentrates out of it and various products that I use. While it helps me with my pain, it also engages me with my hallucinations.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Engaging.
There are a handful of strains that are purported to have extra psychedelic effects, and one of those has the name LSD. It's from Barney's Farm in the Netherlands. We got some seeds, we grew some plants. It also happens to be a good strain for pain, so it's a pretty heavy-hitting strain. Even just vaping it, I experience intense colors. My hallucinations take on very vibrant, colorful quality. Now we have this stock of flower that I've been making concentrates with. I kind of experiment on myself in terms of like what this does to my hallucinations. And I've had like some amazing effects. I see like kaleidoscopic shifting patterns. Me and my brother are going to mash up two strains that are purported to be psychedelic, and then kind of from that develop our own strain once we highlight what is the trait that is really affecting here. Because there are many strains that don't have this effect on my hallucinations. Certain ones do. And I just saw something, one of those manta rays that just passed across my visual field as I said that.
Why not engage in what we're experiencing? For so many people, blindness, or whatever the disability, is viewed as something to run away from. Instead of choosing to try new approaches or adaptations, some spend a lot of time, possibly even the rest of their lives, trying to escape it. I don't want to make it seem like everything about the hallucinations or visions is enjoyable. Every now and then, I experience an avalanche of painfully bright white overtaking the colorful shapes and fighting to engulf my viewing area. It's reminiscent of those eye exams where the doctor shines the light into your dilated pupil. I'm forced to stop, put my head down, and squeeze my eyes shut, hoping to just escape from that bombardment of white. The doctor told me 19 years ago, it'll probably go away in a month or two. Almost 20 years later, Doc. What would you say if you woke up and they were gone?
I'd have a sense of loss, probably. I'd be like, where are my spirits? Where are my friends? It's a new relationship that I have with my body. It's something I'm seeing all the time. I'm laying in bed in a dark room late at night. It's dancing for me, occupying my mind. It's engaging, and it goes really well with music too. Yeah, I think it would be sad if it was missing. When I had to see the ophthalmologist throughout my life, it was always like, okay, in 5 years, there's going to be a surgery, there's going to be a cure or something. Every 5 years, and then you kind of realize it's not going to happen. I don't want a relationship to my body or the world around me that doesn't let me question what I get to question through what I have now.
I know someone right now is thinking, Thomas, bruh, it's not real. Well, television, movies, and fictional characters and books, none of that is real. But we miss them when they're gone. If random shapes and colors inspire me to create art, ask deep questions of myself, or even just entertain me for a moment, who's to tell me what's real? And ever seen a grown man cry when his favorite team loses the championship? Man, don't tell me about real. Shout out to Carmen Papelia.
You can send an email to info@impairedproject.com.
Colin Van Ooshelin. Reach him at burningtears.ca. Andrew Slater.
My Instagram, TikTok, website, YouTube. This is Andy Slater.
These fine gentlemen are the newest and official members of the Read My Mind radio family. You'll have the chance to hear more from each of them later when I release our full conversations, something I've never done. I've been wanting to explore Charles Bonnet syndrome, or CBS, for quite some time, but never found anyone interested in sharing their experience. My hallucinations are quite different from what others typically report, so I felt I would need additional representation. That's where I went wrong. I was never really interested in exploring the diagnosis as much as I was interested in what we see. I want to send a bright, colorful shout out to one of the biggest supporters of this podcast. That's my friend and colleague, Read My Mind radio alum and evangelist, Access Artist, co-host of the Blind-Centered Audio Description Chats, a Rockwood leader, Ms. Cheryl Green. She inspired this episode when she and Carmen Papelia discussed their apparitions on her podcast, Pigeonhole.
Every episode is transcribed. Links, guest info, and transcripts are all at whoamiitostopit.com, my disability arts blog.
Let's just keep the conversation going.
So now I extend my left hand. Was it the right hand? Yeah, I think it's the right hand. So now I extend my right hand. Was it the left hand? So now I extend my left hand, which holds that same baton. Anyone can grab it. There's no guidelines to this. You don't have to pass any certification. And no one is going to stop you. So take this idea of describing your hallucinations and do what you want with it. Feel free to explore in formats other than audio. Disabled artists, graphic designers, poets, musicians. How does this inspire you? Oh, man, I can only imagine. I look forward to wherever y'all take this because I know there's value in what we see. I hope you all feel there's value in Read My Mind Radio. Come rock with us wherever you get podcasts. We have transcripts and more at readmymind.com. Just remember. Oh, snap. Hold on one second. Check out this new image floating in my view. It says R to the E I
D, and that's me in the place to be.
Like my last name. Peace.